We think it's fundamentally problematic when, number one, in conservative societies where there is systematic discrimination against women, when there are no systematic changes happening in, that can benefit women in the status quo, we also think it's also problematic that there are no, organic change, or there's no systematic change that are happening or occurring in the status quo. That's exactly the reason why this type of systematic discrimination against the entire group of women is actually occurring, and there is no, solution that is actually counterintuitive or counterproductive against these types of problems that are happening in the status quo. So with that problem, I want to move on to the characterization of what kind of conservative societies we're talking about. We tell that conservative communities are countries like Saudi Arabia, countries in Africa, in which they have only recently received, in which women have only recently received the right to drive cars, in which women are only starting to actually get basic rights done. We tell that these conservative society is number one, where there is systematic discrimination against women, because oftentimes the systematic discrimination is something that stems out of the cultural and traditional views that actually can also be tied to religious views. These are areas where there's a predominant social construct that harms both men and women, because the opportunities that they could be self-actualizing, these opportunities that they could be expanding, are simply systematically restricted by the social rules that are imposed upon these people, right? But number two, we also tell you that these societies are characterized where females are simply disregarded as powerless and incompetent. We tell that this is a systematic and strong and inherent social construct that tells people or the society that women are simply powerless or incompetent. But even if they are actually powerful and competent, we tell that these women are not able to self-actualize these types of abilities or capacities because of these particular surroundings that systematically restrict these women from actualizing or whatnot, right? But third, we also tell you that without this kind of government intervention or this type of mechanism, we think that there would otherwise be no seed for change. We think that this is an environment where simply organic change cannot happen. Sure, the opposition may tell that, hey, we can wait for organic change, we can wait when people are ready. We tell that people will never be ready for these kind of changes in these conservative societies. That's exactly the reason why we think that it has to be the leadership position, it has to be this particular mechanism that actually changes or challenges this type of systematic discrimination against women. So with that nicely laid out, I'm going to move on to my two arguments. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about why does it particularly have to be male leadership, and I'm going to tell you about the tangible benefits of the exclusive, male leadership that can be derived out of this motion. So first, let's go over this question of why does it particularly have to be the male leadership, right? We think that given this type of context of a status quo, where women are systematically marginalized and where women are systematically discriminated by the society, we tell you that, number one, female leadership is not something that can happen. That's exactly the reason why we think it's much better that we actually have male feminist leadership position in place. But second, we tell that feminism itself, or gender equality itself, is something that's viewed as being rebellious, or being being opposition forces coming from women. That's exactly the reason why there's a predominant social perspective against feminism or gender equality. But we tell you that by providing male presence in leadership, we think that number one, it goes against a particular social construct that feminist movements are only women oriented, or that it's simply women based, right? We tell you that it actually creates a perspective change in which men can actually be a part of the discourse too. It prevents the peer pressure that if you're a man, you simply cannot participate in the particular movement, or that you cannot participate in the particular discourse. We simply change that, the spectrum of which men can actually participate in this type of discourse. We also tell you that it challenges the notion that feminism or gender equality can be simply disregarded or simply be neglected by the society, right? Because now we're putting someone who is a male feminist in leadership position. We're going against and challenging the notion that feminism is not a big deal, that gender equality is not a big deal, right? But second, we also tell you more importantly, it provides a new perspective on feminism. What do I mean by this? We think that especially for males who have been suppressed by the social construct as well, we think that this enlightenment of the importance of gender equality and the importance of feminism itself is a tangible benefit. No. We think the discourse is also easier when male leadership is in presence. In terms of initiating the discourse, in terms of continuing the discourse, and in terms of coming to conclusions with a discourse. Why is that particular discourse easier, right? Because we tell you that in the characterization of conservative societies, we tell you that there are certain strict rules or strict roles that are imposed by the society on the gender by tradition, right? Where if women are fighting for change, or if women are fighting for gender equality and feminism, they would be perceived as going against their given role. They would be perceived as going against their social construct, violating certain rules set by the society. But we tell you that if it's a male, another gender who's actually fighting for this change, that kind of discomfort that comes with females fighting for feminism are actually much less when it's for males, right? For example, if I'm a guy who may have a neutral perspective on women, or gender equality, then obviously if a female starts to fight for their rights, then I would be why are they fighting for their rights? It doesn't make any sense. But if it's a guy fighting for women's change, that it simply gives a platform in which the person can have second thoughts about that particular change or whatnot, right? That's exactly the reason why we tell you that discourse happens much easier, and this is, the discourse has more momentum and more power, for the society overall. We tell you that in contrast, with female, in contrast, we tell you that if it's a female fighting for the change, if it's a female who's in a leadership position, it has a high tendency that people will simply wave off the importance of gender equality, right? We have to prove that feminism discourse benefits both men and requires both genders in the discourse. It's not something that can actually be actualized, that can actually be, materialized only through women. We think that both genders have to be in the discourse. But we're actually telling you that, by actually getting both genders in the discourse and the movement, we're simply fulfilling the purpose of the entire idea of gender equality, where both genders benefit from and where both genders see the importance of equality for each other, right? We think this is fundamentally important. Why? Because for any legislation or for any feminist policies or women-friendly policies to work in the real society, it needs the approval, or it needs, it needs the approval, or it needs to be followed by both genders. It's not something that can only be followed by women. That's exactly the reason why we need this particular perspective change from men as well, because even if legislation or policies are passed, if men don't agree with it, we think that simply these policies will not be fruitful anyway, right? But we tell that this perspective is important fundamentally because it, number one, creates greater ability to implement systematic changes or policies that will eventually benefit and protect women, right? But two, we think that also facilitates that particular perspective change, which will lay out the groundwork that are necessary in order to come up with more social movements, or in order to come up with more participation from both genders when we're talking about any kind of feminist movement or any kind of feminist policies, right? So, we think that sure, social backlash, little public opposition may happen in these conservative societies in the beginning, but that's actually what happens. But that's exactly what happens at the beginning of any kind of meaningful change, right? We think that in comparison, what's the comparative here, right? The outcomes of this particular motion, or the outcomes of this particular mechanism, is that one, we're gonna at least challenge the social construct. At least we're having a change in perception. But two, we think that we're also having the inclusion of both genders in the discourse. And three, we're laying out the groundwork for the systematic changes that should be happening in the future. That's exactly the reason why these outcomes are comparatively much better than the little social backlash or the public opposition that they may be going through temporarily in the short run. That's exactly the reason why, because we told you about why it has to be the male leadership that leads this kind of discourse, and why people feel less discomforted with this type of discourse, and because we also told you about the importance of discourse both for the short term and long run, we're very proud to propose.
Okay, we thank that lady for her speech, and now we welcome the Leader of Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we believe in these conservative societies, when a male feminist is appointed as a leader, this will bring further backlashes, considering the unique characteristics of this conservative society that the Prime Minister just mentioned. We believe that rather, breaking the taboo, breaking this silent agreement that women should not serve leadership roles, bringing these women, no matter how long it takes, by training, by practice, by breaking the perception and by raising awareness, this will be truly able to lead into the way of getting out of the society, conservative society, and bringing truly organic change. So before moving on to my own constructive case, I'd like to briefly rebut to the Prime Minister's case. I have 3 levels of response, because most of them will be incorporated in my arguments. First of all, we're talking about a completely male-dominant society in which politicians, legislators, the president, and all army characters are dominated by males. So, in this situation, what do we think a male feminist will do in this situation when this only one person in this chair or bench of legislators is a feminist, and all others have this conception of a conservative society within them? We believe that in this situation, number 2, when there are social rules, when there are expectations of gender roles, of what a male should do and what a female should do, we believe in this situation there will be even more harm of this male feminist being swayed and not being effectively able to convey the demand, convey the visions of the feminists, convey the visions of the supporters, but rather sway into the dominance, the male dominance, the conservative society that we used to live in. Third of all, even if this happens, even if this male feminist stays a feminist, this will further uphold the social perception that women need males to have their voices heard. Women need appointed males, women need the more capable, the more stronger, the more politically dominant males to make sure that their policies are made, to make sure that their vision, their ideologies are carried out in the political spectrum. Well, thank you, sir. So, having that done, let's move on to our constructive case. Yes, sir.
So, at best, you're still only defending status quo where women have to be dependent on men. After the point in which change occurs, it's still possible for females to drive the change in which they want to change.
No, sir. We're saying that your organic change will not happen in the first place because the society is so conservative, and therefore your attempts for change will be withered out because there are gender perceptions and expectations of a male. So moving on to my argument. We believe that women in leadership roles, breaking this taboo, breaking this ceiling, breaking these chains will be more better. Because women behind men, hiding behind men, and making sure men carry out men are the puppets of their voices, have much more backlashes in conservative societies. So what is our case? First of all, we believe it is impractical for male leaders, considering the characteristic of societies, will turn into non-feminists, a chauvinist to say. So we give you these examples of 3 pressures from society. First of all, from the voters. The voters, the leadership role, no matter what you take, no matter what stance you take, will still have to be voter sensitive. And in this situation, when the majority of the society has a perception of what a male should do, and when a male leader comes out and says that, oh, we should have more women's rights, we should not generally discriminate or systematically discriminate anyone, these voters believe, with their conception of certain gender values, certain gender roles, why is that guy doing this in standing for a female? Second of all, upon also companies and many stakeholders of the government policies, when they also have an expectation, because superior roles, the chair roles, the CEOs are all appointed by men, and all men have this idea that men should be leading this world. When these have a man coming out saying that, oh, I'm a feminist, so therefore your company should implement more gender equal policies, what do they say? No, thank you, sir. When these people have this perception of what a male role should be, what a male gender should be doing, and when a male comes out opposing to these rules, they do not listen to them. Why? Because they think they are being either extremely impractical, extremely going against their social norm, or being hypocritical. Third of all, also upon politicians. Again, ladies and gentlemen, when you have a bench of conservative members in a party of the same party, and you have 50 members who are male dominant, and one member who says, oh, but I'm a feminist, what does this do? It gives this person a pressure. They don't listen to the ideas that they see. This gives these politicians the impression that this male is just merely standing up for females just because to get votes. And this, we believe, is detrimental to our society. So in this situation, in this pressure coming from this systematic order, what does this happen? There is a high possibility, and I have to get into swaying this person back into the norms of male dominance. Why do we believe so? Because the stakeholders, the voters, the society, the politicians place a burden due to the characteristic of a conservative society. Because all of your surrounding leadership roles are men. So we have an expectation for a certain gender role. What men should be doing, what women should be doing. And in this situation, it's that the men should be leading the company, men should be leading the government, and men should be leading the society. And just so then what happens is that there is social pressure because that person itself that is going for roles that are not against the society order is actually a man. And in this situation, why he's a man, he's supposed to have these roles, why is he trying to fulfill the roles that a female wants to do? Or why is he trying to propose the equalities that a female should be doing? And this social pressure, we believe, turns this person, or pressures this person to not have an effective way of making out policies, not having an effective way of voicing out his opinions, and therefore we believe a female leadership role is much more important. Why is this so? We know that these females are free from the roles, free from the expected roles that a male should be doing as in a leadership role, in a politician. We believe these females can be truly not swayed, have a strong fight, put up a fight against this male dominance, these preconceptions, and make sure, because they are female and they are the first-time experiencers of the systematic injustice, will be able to truly bring out change. Second of all, why female leadership is uniquely able to mobilize the female population and feminist movement. We have 5 levels of analysis. First of all, you have better knowledge. These women in the leadership roles have direct experience, they have the direct trauma, they know of the direct consequences, and they know of what should be done to the policies, and what the public should be doing, what the societal order should be done. So first experience can bring systematic organic change, because they know from the first... No, thank you. So they know in the first hand of what has happened, what they need to do, and what they should do. Second of all, better mobilization because of the active supports, because they have the ability to empathize with this woman of their first-hand experiences and what she has done, they're able to have a bottom-to-up feedback system in which the politicians and the voters, these feminists, are able to actively engage upon certain feedback, certain engagement upon policies and their orders and their demands and whatnot. So the cycle of politics is much better mobilized when it comes to females in the leader role. Third of all, it breaks the capacity perception because men should be the superior, the ultimate leader role. In this situation, we believe that leadership itself, the place of leadership, brings superiority and brings order to society. Why? The person in the superior leadership role is able to bring out orders to people beyond, under the hierarchy of orders, under the hierarchy of system of politics. So in this situation, what does this do for the feminist environment? We believe that in this situation, when a female in a leadership position has dominance and superiority over power and hierarchy over a male, this makes the woman also believe and break the preconception that men are more powerful, men are more influential, and therefore men should be the role in the order. And women and men can also be orders. This is the conception that we are wanting. This is the preconception that we want to bring. Fourth, it is a role modeling for the feminist movement that is yet to come. When there is a female appointed at the first place, of course there will be backlashes, of course there will be clashes, but when this female is able to fight and not be swayed by political pressure coming from the opposition, it is becoming a role model for society, making sure that the empowerment of women, the mobilization of women in the political sphere is much more made easier. Fifth, in the conservative society, we have a strict hierarchy and is able to, the highest social influence, with the highest social capital. The society has rules to respect their leaders, so they listen to get better attention, and females are able to be better organic change. We give the example of Jieun and Sungsoo. It's not just that Jieun is a male, it's that his role in a conservative society of hierarchy is able to bring out much more effective effects. So, ladies and gentlemen, very proud to close the
Okay, thank you for that speech, and then we welcome the Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as a male representative of a only female exclusive society in Kida, I believe you will relate quite well to the proposition model today.
Here.
We're talking about a conservative society where fundamentally women have been for a very long time systematically oppressed and systematically discriminated against, where gender equality naturally cannot happen and is not happening for a long time. Even if it can happen in like the next 100 years or so, we think it should be happening as soon as possible. When that's the correct characterization coming from both sides, we don't understand how the opposition could possibly argue for the status quo to remain as it is. We believe as proposition, this model actually cooperates and facilitates the current movements that we're pushing for. And those reasons we're very proud to propose. This debate fundamentally is a comparison between the miserable status quo towards our model and our prospective future. Our third argument as the Deputy Speaker will be this. While attention or any sort of attention and quantity is important for mentality to fundamentally change, which we believe is a fundamental necessity for discourse and changes in society to occur. Before that, I have 5 points of refutations to make. First is a clarification, because we believe the opposition fundamentally misunderstood today's motion. This debate is not about appointing political figures in politics. This debate is about whether certain movements or female activists should appoint male leaders in their specific NGO groups or interest groups to begin with. This is not about electing, because obviously females or feminists cannot appoint a politician to begin with. This debate is not about politicians. It's about who's a face figure for the group that they work with or they undergo the curriculums under. Second and more important rebuttal is this. They said male representatives are more powerful. These dominant societies are where leadership seems to be the only privilege that is guaranteed to men. We say this is exactly the reason why female-led activists or female-led movements are not given proper weight to begin with. Because people think all movements or power should be only given to males. If a female-led activist argue for something, they believe that's not a proper argument or not a proper discourse to even engage with in the first place. This is exactly why we believe, even though it's quite unfortunate, we believe male representative is necessary for it to even stand in an equal playing field with societal discourse to begin with. Third point of refutation on their point about it creates an image that males should be leading and women are always dependent. Okay, first, even if you accept that to be true, you see that's no different from the status quo which they support. We believe the exclusive benefit coming from our side is this. It's a comparison, right? Then I'm going to prove my argument where even if it's true at the beginning, how this in the long term will actually lead to change in people's mentality, where this will allow for more males to actually care and even change their positions in the long term. But here's the more interesting thing that first speaker did say. First speaker said when a male figure leads these feminist movements, people will question what is he doing, like why is he there, what is he saying. We believe this is exactly what the proposition is looking for in today's space. People will question exactly what that guy is, exactly what is he saying, and why he is there. More importantly, people will wonder why in a conservative society where they're socially created to think that males should be against females to begin with, they'll be wondering exactly what that guy's mentality is. We believe that's the exact change and that's the exact attention that we uniquely provide into the government model, which in the status quo is not being provided at all. Why? Because people don't really think and people don't think they should care about this issue to begin with. Fourth, they say females have better knowledge. First, they say that's fundamentally a wrong assumption. They make it sound as if male feminists can never truly be feminists. That's another debate to begin with. But the more important second rebuttal is this. We're talking about a leader in a feminist group or in a civic movement to begin with. We say that guy doesn't necessarily have to have better knowledge than the rest of the group. Why? Because contrary to a CEO of a company, we believe the unique role of a leadership position in a civic movement, for example, is very different. Why? Because he's not the only person that makes all the decisions for that group. In other words, in a civic movement, a lot more discourse and cooperation between the members happen compared to companies where clear hierarchies exist. Therefore, we believe the role of a representative in a civic movement, for example, is not necessarily a hierarchical relationship, but a cooperative relationship where the representative serves as a social figure or face figure for the society that represents that group specifically. Therefore, we say even if that guy is not better equipped with knowledge, he has the rest of his group to talk with and consult with, which he will obviously do. So we don't have a problem with that. Final clarification is this. They didn't engage with our first speaker's argument. Our first speaker's fundamental case was this. When it comes to civic movements, when it comes to gender equality, mutual relationship and cooperation and interaction to begin with was the most important thing. They never engaged how mutual interaction could happen under the status quo, which our first speaker elaborated very, very well. I'm going to move on to my argument as a third speaker. Why attention, which the EDLO did provide, will be created thanks to him, where any quantity of attention itself is important. Two levels of analysis. First, how is more attention garnered? And second, why is that attention important to begin with? First, how is more attention garnered? As the EDLO also said, we believe the more attention will be garnered when people are fundamentally curious or when people are faced with a counterintuitive scene to begin with. People will think exactly why is that guy there? Exactly what is that guy saying? Contrary to female-led movements, which our first speaker elaborated as people perceiving as being unimportant or something that can easily weigh off, we believe people will stop momentarily and see and actually have a doubt in their minds to begin with. But the second and more important thing is this. Our first speaker mentioned that in these conservative societies, sometimes peer pressure pushes males to be against females to begin with. We argue that sometimes there are some males who are innately, or some males who are enlightened to think that gender equality should be provided to all genders no matter what, even in conservative societies. The problem with the status quo is because of peer pressure, these members find it very difficult to join these feminist groups. But more importantly, because feminist groups are led by females, because it seems to be a little more burdensome for them to join, they're not easily able to opt in. Contrary to status quo, under our model, when a male representative exists, as a male figure who has doubts, it's a lot easier for me to opt in to that feminist group to begin with. Now, why is this attention, or why is this quantity of attention important to begin with? First, we say when an idea is to be implemented, or when a mentality is to be changed, the very fundamental necessity is for you to think and for you to question yourself. In other words, we're talking about a status quo where people are dictated by social norms. Social norms telling them that females are fundamentally inferior to males or the leaders. We say feminist or gender equality is first of all logically reasonable and logically rational to begin with. Of course women are equal with men. Of course men are not superior to women. That's exactly why when fundamentally people will question themselves against the irrational social norm to begin with. In other words, when people will question, is gender equality something that should actually be provided? Is it okay for me to actually think that women can also lead a group? We believe logically speaking, people have more incentive to actually care and change their position against the irrational social norm that dictates a unilateral saying that no matter what, women are inferior towards men. We're talking about a status quo that is failing to begin with. We don't understand how the opposition could fundamentally argue that the status quo could be condoned to begin with, but the exclusive benefits coming from the proposition are evident for very practical.
Okay, we welcome now the Deputy Leader Opposition.
Sorry. I'm ready. Okay. They say they want to change the status quo. How much of the change are they actually making? They said for a very few NGOs, which they are discriminated and looked down upon by the majority of the population anyways, they will have a male leadership. And people are curious, like, why the fuck? Can I say fuck on camera? Like, why the fuck are, like, why the fuck are males representing females, which we despise? And this curiosity somehow leads to discourse. This discourse somehow leads to, like, healthy idea of listening to them and making the policy changes, right? We think that this definition came out in the second speaker against the first speaker's, like, broad general definition of what a leadership should be if the woman had the power to appoint them in various fields, right? So, like, I think standing at the DPM is wrong in parliamentary debate, but it also hurts their case because it's not going to make any change away from the status quo, right? Because there's no significant people. A company has to be run by a woman or run by a feminist man in order to see people to see that how, a feminist man or a feminist woman can control a company, and then that's when we have the debate, right? Let's take a very truistic thing. Let's clarify this circular logic because that's what Sera said. Sera said, like, we have no option for other, like, male other female candidates, so let's do it with male candidates. This is like saying the same thing as like liberals that human leadership instead of bugs because we can do bugs, we can't do bugs, right? We only have humans left. No, we reject this notion because especially she like rebutted to herself in the second argument where she made the comparison between the female leaderships and the male leaderships, right? We think that this debate ultimately needs to come down to when the females already have power, like appointment power in any certain groups, when the female leadership can be grown in these circumstances, like if they don't have education, have more education, right? If they can have appointment power, we think that they have already some kind of education now. I think even in cases like they said in Saudi Arabia or Nigeria, there are many rich girls who have a lot of tertiary education level, right? So we think this is a debate that we need to talk about. Female leadership or male leadership. But these to their case, no, actually the second speaker's case on NGOs. No, I didn't make, we made a contradiction. Okay, so first of all, we think they still haven't answered the question of will the male leader keep being a feminist once they're counted in any type of organization, right? We think that in conservative societies, like a true feminist, first of all, true feminist leader is very hard to find. Like, let's take a look at Korea. Like, feminist is very different from feminism, right? When we think of feminists in, somehow developed countries like Korea, we still have very, very negative notions about it. How it should be only like supporting women above males, and males should like do all the shit, and females should like play around, and males should not pay for anything. That's not what really feminism is. But that's the perception that many of these males have, many of the males would have, because it's not a mainstream thought, school of thought, especially in those conservative societies. So first, rebuttal is that you can't really get a person who has the same ideal and with the same language, speaking the same language as females. But secondly, is that they still haven't rebutted to what our first speaker has clearly mentioned to you, right? That there is going to be a huge peer pressure, not just from from his family, from his friends, but also from his other peer companies, other peer politicians, right? Even in NGOs, like the people listening to the NGO speech will say, yes, they might get attention, like the first speaker and second speaker said, but you'll be like, what the fuck attention? Not like, why would they be interested in taking his words seriously if they think that they are betraying their own kind, right? If a male is speaking up there, it has a sense of unnaturalness to it, which is very unique to a male leadership position in those conservative societies. If a male is speaking for the females, why should that be? Right? Because male is not supposed to speak up for females. Because of this unnaturalness, there's going to be a lot of pressure on these males to turn back towards it and quit the job. Especially in NGOs, because I don't know how much they pay you, but it's probably not going to be enough if people start throwing stones and tomatoes at you, right? So let's move on to the better question then of what is leadership in a conservative society, right? Because we reject the notion coming from the simplistic notion coming from the government team, which stated that conservative society, guys, is a woman-hating society, and we need to change the woman-hating society, right? Because we think that conservative society more than that. We think conservative society has characteristics that's likely to strictly adhere to social rules. And when it comes to social rules, hierarchy and leadership has a huge cultural implication in it, which was never rebutted to, although carefully elaborated by the first speaker, right? What he was trying to say at the 7 minutes 40 mark was that in Korea, even if it's your company boss, you have 존댓말, even if it's younger than you, still do 존댓말, right? And you pay a lot of protocol and like ceremonial stuff to your company boss, right? Like he might be younger than me. I mean, like he might have just gotten the job because of my dad or whatever. But being in a leadership position, especially gives that kind of respect, especially gives that kind of certain aura, and also a commanding aura, which gives direct superiority. Because I'm a leader, I can order you to do stuff because I'm in a superior positioning. Right? This is what a conservative society is versus, let's say, Google or whatever, right? Like that's pretty cool. Anyways, let's move on to this. They're actually saying that no, they're making a powerless stereotype even further that Sera talked about, right? We're giving them an unequal positioning, and to accentuate the idea, okay, even if there's an NGO, we are females, but we can't speak on our own. Our organization cannot possibly run on our own, so we have to appoint a mayor to it. They might not think it that way, but that's the perception that the mayor's going to get, because that's the perception they have already. And we think in these cases, they further extend the idea that women need a man to speak instead of them, which is the same as the status quo's logic in those conservative society, that husbands should speak for the wife if the wife has a problem. That's a huge conservative rhetoric, which they're simply further extending towards the conservative society, right? Which is the status quo, which they don't like, right? So even if we're talking about NGO representative males, right, at the best case scenario, in which people are interested and people will listen to the NGO males because they're minority, the benefit will be less. But we think more importantly that the real important benefits of listening to female leadership in position and looking at that interaction, and we're talking about social role modeling and social messaging from further perspective on a social level, on looking at a group that runs and functions perfectly even with a female leadership. You look at company or NGOs that functions perfectly with a female leadership, and that's when you start to get curious, and that's when you have to discourse about it, like shit, maybe having a female leadership has some benefits, right? So we think that it further has to do with further better knowledge as well, because they rebutted by that, no, better knowledge is not true. Well, no, it's true, because in a conservative society, then women don't listen to them, right? So we think that, in cases like Aborigines in Australia, or even European chivalry, the minorities like women or minorities like Aborigines were largely protected by the white people or the males. But they didn't get their rights fulfilled. Why is that? We think it's because they didn't have a clear leadership positioning, but they also couldn't have a feedback system that Sungsoo talked about. Which means that if on my period and I'm a girl, if I'm on maternity leave, it's much more comfortable to ask these kind of things from my female boss, right? So this kind of interaction is something all these kind of things uniquely come from only our side of the house, which they didn't rebut to, right? But Sera talked about how they want to lay down the foundation for the future, but they didn't really tell us the train that's gonna run on this foundation or whatever. They didn't prove to us how the male appointed will stay there, or even likely to propose good female ideas. Or instead, we think that there is probably the idea that males should continue to speak for males. And also, we think that when we start having female leadership, more importantly, then it's likely to spark that discourse that the government team wanted. And this person's discourse, that other male leaders might want to listen to that too. And in that process, we can have male leaders supporting for feminist causes. We're not mutually exclusive on that sense, but they want 100% male leadership. That's the problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that speech. Now we welcome the government group speaker.
The world in which opposition wants to depict in this debate does not exist. For one thing, they say that it's a very fucking dominant society, that they won't even listen to men, but that they won't even listen to women. And in that kind of a dominant society, what position would women take, either in a company or in a government, to appoint a male leadership? We think that that kind of definition or setup from them was rather irresponsible but unreasonable for them to set up. But if they so thought that the clarification was necessary, then you think that there could have been at least efforts to question it from the leader of opposition, but they've only simply assumed the context would be in a political scenario or a context where women would be appointing a male leadership into providing some kind of political or tangible benefit, where they wanted to talk about votes and whatnot. We think that this kind of definition or this context was never really a way in which opposition wanted to argue in this debate. But let's also clarify the context in which they wanted to define in this motion. They said that exactly the kinds of societies that we live in are ones that are very male dominant. We think that for one thing, we think that when they argue that it's male dominant, there's nothing like an absolute around the world. What I mean by this is in the sense that even if we are to say that it's a very dominant male society where it's very conservative, we do still see some instances where individuals have their own different values or beliefs that they want to live by. We don't necessarily think or buy into the idea that these kind of dominant societies or conservative societies are ones where they simply have only men who are always male dominant to perceive that women are always inferior. We think that there's an outright outrageous discrimination and a characterization that's a narrative that doesn't fit to any country in the case of the opposition side unless they want to debate about North Korea. In which case we think that they need to engage more to the context that's more reasonable as what we argued on government side, talking about at least there are some kinds of male feminists who want to promote different kinds of views. Because it seems like when opposition wants to argue in some kind of a vacuum, to argue that male dominant societies are always going to be men who always have the same agenda, the same kind of roles that they want to take in society, we think that in that kind of definition or context, no kind of change can ever happen. We think that there aren't being a realistic debate or a team that's responsible in this debate. I'm going to clarify several things, 3 things in my speech. I'm going to talk about, first of all, whether this leadership position is better fit by under the case of a male or a female. Secondly, why exclusively the leadership position and the exclusive harms that we identify, the harms and the benefits that are rather proposed by both sides, and a comparative of why, at least on our side, it's better. Now, thank you. Now, let's clarify one thing. They always talked about all this backlash that would exist, and they always argued that there's backlash that will exist in terms of whether it be male or female. But we've exclusively provided you as to why a male leadership, or even that kind of backlash, is still at least at best status quo. The kinds of discrimination or the gender stereotypes that exist are at least even still status quo, in the sense that male would think that females are inferior and that they have to depend on women. Yes, to some extent we might be conceding, we're not actually saying that there won't be no backlash. On a comparative level, if opposition wants to argue that there's going to be no listening or no attention to women or even females, then they also have equal burden to show why, even when it comes to females being in the leadership position, why that's a better case or that's a better organic change. Because they've only simply asserted, but they've never provided any single analysis as to why a female would actually be in a better position under their characterization of it being a very dominant society where nobody wants to listen to them and nobody appreciates the fact that they're questioning it. But the exclusivity when it comes to the male being in a position as such is because, for one thing, it's the female deciding upon who's going to represent them. So even if they want to argue whether if they have enough information or direct trauma or experience, we think that that's outright disgusting and abhorrent to think that individuals are never able to connect with each other. We think that that kind of narrative is what we want to actually eliminate. But furthermore, we think that as our members talked about in this debate, a representative of a civic movement are ones who are representing the voice, and we think that the ideas of the experience can also still be delivered by these male leaderships, and that's why we think that there's no exclusive harm or problem in the case of a male becoming in a position to represent women. But for one thing, we think that the stance in the goal of government was very clear in this debate, in the sense that we wanted to promote gender equality. What we mean by that is that it's not necessarily where we're creating a tension or backlash, where either one's depending on another, but we rather think that the ultimate goal of feminism is to promote gender equality, meaning that we don't want to create any kind of situation to think that it's a backlash or that one is an inferior or a superior position, but we think that it's a mutual relationship that exists because women are also fighting for equality, where men are able to better actualize, like become individuals working at homes, not necessarily always people working for a particular career and vice versa. We think that that kind of actualization is what we ultimately want to promote at the end of the day. But furthermore, I think that the more problematic side when it comes to opposition, no thank you, is that they're very cherry-picking the context without clarifying what's theirs and what's ours. Because what we've been very clear in this debate is that they've only wanted to engage on certain parts of our context, and they've made certain arguments and claims under their context, which only shows that they're only picking the context that are best for them. But at least we think that from the very beginning, the government side was reasonable to show as to how this kind of society lives in a particular context, and that's the more consistent stance coming from our side. Because at the end of the day, what opposition side provided you was basically nothing, was to simply assert that female leaders are better. But they've never provided any analysis as to what possibility would this female leader have in order to promote some kind of change or discourse. But what we told you is, when a male leader is actually questioning the ideas of the society, then at least for one thing, people will find less discomfort in the sense that women are opposing the social norms. But secondly, even if that male leader was to be questioned by society, we think that that kind of question, that curiosity, or that kind of uprise is at least that's something that's going to create a dent or actually some kind of a spark to have some minimum discourse about what should be the way in which we should approach women or approach men, or these kind of negative stereotypes towards either genders in the society. Now, respond to that.
Okay, look, our definition simply includes every society, including your NGOs. That's why our arguments work against NGOs too. But why should Andy believe that, changing a couple of NGOs' leadership will prove a significant enough change, right? Because they're the minorities.
Okay, so this is basically what opposition says. Women are minorities, they cannot oppose it, so we want to have some, at least, change. Because at least what they need to show is, okay, so here's what's funny. So they say that NGOs are really small and that, there's a very male-dominant society, which basically says that they're fucked. They can't do anything. The NGOs are small, the civic movements are small, and women won't receive any attention, which is actually kind of counterintuitive to think when opposition is the one that's supposed to support, at least that civic movements can actually create some kind of change. We think that what's reasonable for both sides to argue is that these civic movements can actually make a change. It's a comparative of whether it should be male or female, but they're actually arguing against everything at all. They're saying civic movements fail in a context of male-dominant society when you can't have a woman to gain power, but they're saying that even with these civic movements, if it's a male leadership, nothing would change. So we don't understand what they want to actually argue at the end of the day. Now, in terms of leadership, I'll provide an example. Like, for instance, when we had African Americans trying to create some kind of civil or political rights as a movement, when we saw white leadership, like white politicians participate, or in the civic movement, we saw a synergy effect and a better benefit in the sense that we're able to see that more individuals are participating from a diverse perspective, and that's essentially why we think that that's rather more of a better scenario. But the exclusive benefit that came from opposition, from government, was very clear. We think that there are going to be role models, at least still on the government side as well, because they always wanted to argue that a role model is best only under a female leadership. But we provided you as to how there's going to be more grassroots movements, or rather more comfort in men participating in the grassroots movement for this civic movement. We think that's a mass model that we can actually provide as an exclusive benefit, because models aren't necessarily always leaders. It could be models that exist in a grassroots, participating in a little level, trying to create some kind of change, or it could also be towards the leadership. So we think that this role model is actually going to exist both for women and men, and that's why therefore the exclusive benefits are greater. We would like to propose that this happens. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that speech. Now we welcome the opposition whip.
Mr. Speaker, I'll clarify you again why our context is actually makes sense more, why it's a broader debate under our side, and then I'll present to you two clashes to debate, which opposition clearly won. The two questions I'll be asking in today's debate is number one, what happens when a male feminist is appointed in leadership position? Why is there so many backlashes? Why it produces more reinforcements of the stereotypes that women have? Second question, why is having a female feminist better in leadership position? And I'll also explain to you why change will also necessarily happen under our side. But before that, a few more context, right? Because we think the narrow concept and the narrow characterization of what it means to be in leadership position was very narrow coming from the government when they decided to limit the debate to NGOs, leadership positions in NGOs. But we included that and we also acknowledged and analyzed that in their context as well. So all of our policies also make sense under their context. We broaden the debate to any leadership position in that society. Because we are debating under the notion that appointment power is already there and choosing between male feminists to represent the voices of the females and appointing like a female feminist to represent the voices of the females. No, thank you both of you, right? So term picking is actually on their side, right? Let's ask the first question of what happens when a male feminist is appointed in leadership position. They say better discourse and they say, oh, now we can question their mentality because a male is suddenly acting for female rights. Two levels of analysis. Number one, the words of males will be shut down anyway because there is an expectation for men to conform more to the male-oriented perception that is already pervasive in that society. Number two, the male figure will not be able to voice his opinion when 9 out of 10 is going to expect him to say otherwise, right? They will never be able to overcome the peer pressure that is also prevalent as they conceded from government, right? If discrimination is that systematic, when a female figure is talking about women's rights, the response of the other male figures will not be, oh, that's a good point, but it will be that the natural response that they will take is, number one, they will react with rage because it goes directly against the norms that have been structurally grounded for so many years, right? But on the second level, it's betraying their own gender, right? They have expectations of what males are supposed to say, males are supposed to represent. We think representation under that society will never happen because the males will never voice their opinions out in the open. But as our PM and our as our LO and our DLO also said, it's also that even with good policies, even with good ideas, females will never be able to represent that because now you're conceding to the fact that women can't voice their own opinions out. They need the power of men to speak out for them, even with the great policies that they have. We think that reinforces the concept that they described, right? In that women are incompetent and women can't speak up for themselves. We think that reinforces that discrimination. We never want that under this debate. But second, and more importantly, why isn't having a female feminist better in leadership position? We think we don't need the power of men to speak up for ourselves because with any transition from a conservative society to a liberal society, we see that there has been no help, right? If you see the European movement, we didn't need men to make demonstrations about why women need suffrage rights. Women did that on their own, and that's why they made a stronger transition because they spoke up for themselves. They did not use the power of men to do that to do it. But why is curiosity and discourse the biggest value coming from government, and why is that more reinforced under our side? Number one, why will the words of females be disregarded in the first place? Let's analyze that for a second because they never engaged to our hierarchy analysis that we gave you, right? Why will they be heard? Because in the status quo, females are below males. There have never been cases in which females and males are having equal ground to begin with. This is why they didn't deserve to be heard because they were under in terms of their hierarchy, right? But that was very simplistic coming from the government to say, oh, conservative society equals sexist society. But we gave you more analysis than that, right? We think a conservative society is also a society that runs by strict hierarchy, in which leadership positions also have more power to voice their influences, right? This is exactly why women have to be in that leadership position to utilize that power of hierarchy to influence their values, right? Why will they also be heard? Because they're not expected to necessarily fight for men's rights, right? Of course they will fight for women's rights when a feminist woman is appointed as a leadership position. It's a natural concept that men are also it's more natural to accept it that way. No, thank you. But we give you a dozen more benefits as to why it's better for a female feminist to move into that position, right? Sungsoo already gave you 5 levels of analysis why it's better. Number one, that person can act as a role model, right? Because we think in society, even with viable policies, if you need men representatives, and if other female feminists see that, we think that that's reinforcing that incapability, right? But moreover, we think that direct experience, the direct discrimination that these women went through, make them more active and better leaders. Why is that? We think, yes, we can see the fact that they're not making policies, no. But in that context, it's even worse when you have a male representative, because that male representative the role of that leader is very limited. They will only act as a puppet. They will have no active role in change because they don't know what it feels like to go through in that male pervasive society. All they will know is the direct and indirect experiences of their other female like workers or whatnot, right? We think when the innate drive to make and fix the exact discrimination that is going into their policies, that is going into their ideas, when a female representative is in leadership position, it's much better. But let me explain to you also why change is better in our society. Change will also happen in our society. Yes.
Be the first speaker in your entire bench to prove to us that in a conservative society where even the males are going to be shut down by the discourse, how will females actually have the power to voice out their opinion anyway?
That was my analysis of my second clash, right? We think it's much more natural for a woman to speak about women's rights. There's much more backlash when there's more expectation of men to talk about men's rights, to reinforce men's rights. But if that man is suddenly talking about something else, that will be where more backlash will happen, right? But moreover, let me explain to you why change will happen. Because they also conceded to the fact that even in countries like Saudi Arabia, even in these culturally sexist societies, we think even these powerless and incompetent women, even in those societies, are now in the trend in receiving these basic rights. There's a moving trend into giving these women more power and empowering them even more, right? We think also when it comes to international pressure, when it comes to other liberal societies, also pressuring them to conform to the human rights, to conform to feminist movements that are happening all over the world, we think that international pressure is what drives this trend even faster. Because other liberal societies also went through that transition a long time ago. They shortened that transition to begin with. We were the only side that gave you a correct context of what it means, or what it means to have a backlash when a male representative is in order. We were the only ones that characterized to you the exclusive benefits of having a female president or female leadership in these kind of societies. We are very proud to propose.
Wow, Jieun replied so harsh. What was your first argument? Here. What? Oh, yes. I can't see my. Sorry, Chair. Okay, I'm going to first analyze just the technical burdens on each side. Secondly, I'm going to talk about their snowballing case matter because, suddenly at the whip, it becomes clear to us what they were trying to say, right? And then I'm going to explain who actually changes things in the long run. And let's just talk frankly and realistically, what have been the changes in the trend in the past history that the operation will explain, right? So first, in terms of the technical changes, right? Because we think that when it's a case like this, when the PM doesn't really set it specifically to NGOs and feminist movements, and specifically, she talked about how there's no women who are willing and able to take the job of leadership, because that doesn't really sound like NGOs. You did say that during your speech. So that's why we thought it was about companies and everything. But even if it's the case, first of all, we told you how our argument all makes sense to them, how our role modeling also makes sense to them, how we show them, how an NGO can function properly, and how if I'm a female or a person, then it's just better for this female person to talk to the male leader, talk to the female leader, and give them my concerns about my periods or my maternity leave, because I have more trust in them. We think that the males have also, more male leaders have less incentive to stay in the position, or we think female leaders will be in a better position to actually know what these people want, and actually know the true definition of feminism, because we think that otherwise there's just more animosity against them, right? So I'll explain that later. So our argument basically makes sense here. I'll explain later. But I think that they have the burden also to engage a little bit to our case, to explain how their logic works against our case too. All the words we heard was that's not true in a conservative society, right? Especially the second speaker. He has 7 arguments that started with that's not true, and then just moved on, right? So we think that their burden to engage in both cases when it's a case like this, because our definition is not another definition. Our definition is broader. Let's just not engage, right? I'll talk about their snowballing case then, right? So I'll explain in one sentence because they couldn't do it for the 2 substantive speakers, okay? NGOs exist, feminist, woman-hating societies, right? And males leading them, will start up conversation because people are interested. And so people listen, and then other males get more comfortable with supporting women, right? So that was their case. But we had like 4 rebuttals to this, which was all largely engaged. First of all, the nature of males and efficacy on continuation, which was never rebutted against our side at all, right? Like if I'm in a conservative society, like Korea, for example, let's talk about like homosexuals, because we're very against homosexuals. If I become a homosexual group leader, my mom is gonna beat the crap out of me, right? My friends, like homophobic friends, will go like, what the fuck are you doing, man? So when Sera raised the PR to the opposition rib and talked about like, if they hate women so much, how are you gonna spark anything? No. We're saying that we are going to, in the conservative stage, we hate weird men. Weird men who are unnatural in like specifically taking up those mantles and positions in a worst case scenario that they needed to decide to, defend against, right? Secondly, like I said, the PR that he didn't respond to, the scope of the debate then becomes something that we shouldn't really care about because 2 NGOs changing, that's not gonna make much of a change. No rebuttal to this at all. Third rebuttal was that, look, chivalry, European chivalry, the example I gave, was to help women as well, right? But we're not speaking in a context where women get no food, so they need food or whatever. We're talking about changing perception of what a woman can do, changing perception on what woman's possibility in order to rise up to the ladder is. That's why they really needed to engage in my substantive about the hierarchy system, right? Because even at the best case scenario, even if people listen to you because now your NGO is run by a male person, male person, then we think it's bad. It's ultimately saying that, oh, now we got a male speaking, now it gives me the chance to listen to them. Not because, why? Because I'm not willing to negotiate with a female person, right? We think its attention of that is going to be further limited in any of the rights negotiations further on. Whereas a female would have these kind of naturalness to them, but would also have an ideal and a role model, a social message that a perfect NGO can function on its own with a female leadership. They can make great speeches. They can write and become like international authors or whatever, the Time magazine or whatever, right? We think these kind of social message also was never rebutted to them, especially because they didn't really provide linkages as to why this was a unique function that is necessary in order to bring about any change, right? Because we didn't need any kind of male leader, like men want feminist like movement leader in the European century, right? No, it's not. It was all led by the female, and that's why it made it so much more effective. Because they showed them maybe we should give a suffrage because they know how to vote, because they know how to run an organization. We think this kind of thing is choked out on their side. Why? Because at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, we are only talking about the 2% left. Everything else is run by the males already. For the 2% left, where females do have, can have leadership position chances, they're suffocating, choking it out, making it a full hierarchy system where men are always better than women. We oppose to this idea. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that speech. Now, the final speech is the government reply.
Mr. Speaker, there's simply too many manipulations coming from the opposition. First of all, there's obviously a key shift between the L and the rest of the 3 speakers in top team. L, from the very beginning, clearly mentioned we live in a male, these are male-dominant societies where men are all in power. If that's so true, then exactly how does any woman in any company have the power to appoint their CEO? We believe in a reasonable ground, and that's the topic to begin with, and that's the context to begin with. We believe this is obviously talking about civic groups where women are in power, where women do have the power to appoint the leadership to begin with. That's only common sense to begin with. But more important is this. Opposition whip brings a lot of new material coming from their side, making it sound as if they already talked about it. I'm going to explain my question why that was a new material to begin with, therefore a development of their case. Also, they didn't engage and respond to a lot of the arguments coming from the opposition, which we believe are shameful because we're very proud of our logic to begin with. I'm going to start my today's debate with 2 questions. First, what happens? Second, will it work? But before that, we have to make sure this is the debate that we have today. Opposition is defending the status quo, which they portray to be quite miserable. In fact, the DLO on numerous occasions said in the status quo, female groups or minorities are not hurt by people anyway. In a society where men, because of peer pressure, are all stupid and never care about women. When that's the context, we don't understand how they could possibly continuously argue for the status quo to remain itself. 2 questions. First, what happens? From the very get-go, we told you more attention will be created. And why is more attention needed? We told you more attention needs to change to begin with. I'm going to explain that. L did agree to us by saying more attention would be created. Why? Because in a society where male are seen to be the only leaders, he said it was counterintuitive. Therefore, people will doubt and think before as to why that guy is standing there talking about whatever he's talking about. I believe we call that itself attention, where people pause for a moment and question exactly what is happening, which is not happening in the status quo because they don't care about what women are saying. Now, opposition web comes up and says and points out a new material saying people will be enraged and angry at that guy, calling him a traitor. That's completely new logic. That did not come from the LO to begin with, but that was never engaged with your government model to begin with. But more important is this, why is change important? DPM provided an argument that was never engaged by none of the opposition speakers. We said this change or this attention was important for individuals' mentality to change. Why was that? Because we call these social norms irrational. We said gender equality was logical and rational. Therefore, if people actually think for themselves on a logical basis, they're more easily likely to change their position to begin with, contrary to the irrational social norm, never engaged by any of the opposition speakers. Second question is this, will it work on a practical level? The arguments coming from the opposition, one-liner arguments are this. First, male feminists don't know. That's the exact problem that we find on proposition. They say male feminists or males can never really understand what females need and want. We believe that mentality where they think that only females can understand females, therefore males and females can never cooperate and interact with one another, is exactly what creates a divide between the two genders, therefore what worsens gender discrimination to begin with. That's the exact problem with the opposition. But the more important analysis coming from our side was this. We called, as the deputy speaker did say, we said on a civic movement, this leadership position was not based on a strict hierarchy. Therefore, we call this movement, we said this leadership was an environment where there's a lot more cooperation and discourse happening between the members. Contrary to the characterization coming from the DLO, we did engage with our model to begin with. But the most important thing is this. PM said in the status quo, even in a conservative society, there are some people, some males who want to argue for feminist views. She said that because of peer pressure, they can't easily change their position. DPM and WIP later said, when this model takes place, when a male representative exists as a role model, you're more likely to opt into the feminist movement because you now have a role model to follow, and you're not the only one who has to fight against the social norm as a male who wants to care about females. Never engaged by any of the opposition speakers, even though this was a consistent stance coming from the proposition. The biggest problem with the opposition today was their lack of consistency. Their lack of consistency in their arguments, and their consistency in failing to engage with the government's arguments. For those reasons, we cannot possibly condone the status quo. We're very practical.